It's all things CES with guest host Jeff Halash. We break down the latest tech announcements from Dell, Lenovo, HP, and more. Plus, Intel VP Stephanie Hallford returns to discuss a wealth of Intel CES news like the new 11th Gen Core vPro and Evo. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 172, Project Bane. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode 100 and what are we on now, Rich? 172. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine program for you. And who are you? Well, you're a lot like our guest host today, and I'm going to introduce him first because I'm really excited to have him back. Our good friend, Jeff Halash, owner of TechNut Computer Repair and host of the MSP Unplugged podcast. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, everybody. Nice to be here and just hang out and talk all things hardware today, it sounds like.
And Jeff, when I say people like you, well, what kind of person are you so our listening audience knows who they are?
I am a computer repair technician / business owner, delve in all things technology related over the last 20 some odd years. Long time. Anything that deals with technology. I've dealt with it over the years and then turned it into a business about 10 years ago and been good ever since. So technology is not going away. PCs are not going away. So let's just let's nip that right in the bud right now. The business and PCs are not dead.
They're not dead, and Jeff is right there with on the front lines with those managed service providers, with the IT integrators, with the VARs out there. So those who basically work with technology with other businesses, you are in the right place. If you are a bear trainer for a circus, you're probably not in the right place, but what the hell? We welcome you anyway. This is a fun show. You're going to learn something one way or another. Also joining us each and every week is who I like to say is the man of the hour, the man who keeps the trains running on time here at Channel Pro, executive editor Rich Freeman. Welcome, Rich.
Well, thank you, Matt. And if you are a bear trainer and you're listening to the podcast, just stick around, listen to the entire podcast. This is a lot safer than what you would otherwise be doing.
That's right. And when I say bear trainer, I don't mean like Chicago Bears football. I mean like literally in the trenches, whip with a big giant grizzly. I want to do that job. That might be fun, Rich. Have you ever tried to train a wild animal?
I have not. I have not. That would be fun for the first 5 minutes, and then you would be dead.
And it's funny that we're laughing at that, but I actually have friends that actually go like hunting and like go into like Alaska and stuff and like go try to like see bears in person and like hunt bears. No joke. I wouldn't do it, but there are people in this world who like bears, I guess. How did we get onto the topic of bears, by the way? Like, what do we do? What are we talking about? The topic of today, Rich, is something big that happens each and every year, although it's not as big this year as it is in years past. But of course, we're talking about the Consumer Electronics Show. And we could think of no one better to have on our show today to talk about, especially a lot of hardware-related stuff than our good friend, Jeff Halash. Now, Jeff, for those who may not have caught any episodes that you've been on with us before, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and what you do and why you are the man for this show?
Well, I have been dinking around with computers since I was probably 13 years old. All the way back to TI 99s and all that kind of stuff, writing in basic code using cassette drives. Yeah. Actual cassettes with a wiring harness to actually hook into the computer to play things like King's Quest. So between that and consoles and stuff like that, I love technology. I love electronics. I love just anything that's innovative, anything that's new and that comes out. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those subjects. I'm kind of a little skeptical of whether there is a whole lot of innovation nowadays anymore. But, so I've been doing that for a long time. And then obviously working in the technology field, running a managed service and doing residential work, a little bit of both. So.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for being on and being here. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And normally I'd like to spend a little more time with our guests. And we'll maybe put a couple links to some past shows where Jeff has talked about himself a little more in depth, but because we got a lot to cover and I know we only got you for like another 50 minutes. So I want to dive in. So Rich, why is CES different this year than it is in years past?
because it is not in Las Vegas. It is online. Like everything else, that is a virtual event.
And Rich, I tell you, I got to tell you, I used to cover CES long ago in person. I after doing that for like 4 years, I would have dreamed. It would have been my dream to have CES online. Just put it all online, and then I don't have to have sore feet for 6 days afterwards. Yeah, but see, now, Rich, for those who may not be familiar, I can't imagine anybody listening to this would be unfamiliar. But what is CES?
Well, CES, and we should point out, CES is CES now. It used to be called the Consumer Electronics Show. It is now officially known as CES, which I guess officially stands for nothing, but we know what it used to stand for. And it is, in a normal year, it is this massive, massive extravaganza. Anyone who makes hardware that, consumers might buy is there. Just as an aside, my father, who was like a hardcore audiophile, used to live in Las Vegas, and he would go to CES every year to see all the new audio stuff. So I mean, it goes way beyond computer electronics, but this is sort of the place every year where anyone who makes PCs, for example, or peripherals or whatever, this is where they kind of showcase what we're going to be doing in the year ahead. And so, even if we're not physically in Las Vegas, all the big names made their announcements this week anyway.
Yeah, usually gigantic displays of the newest televisions and audio stuff. I mean, like CS is usually, like Richie said, an extravaganza beyond anything we've ever seen. Now, on this show, we're going to focus primarily on the PC and IT technology side of things that have kind of come out of CES, and some of it is new notebooks and laptops and computers. Some new technologies. We've got Intel had a huge amount of stuff to talk about, and later on in the show, we're going to have an interview with Stephanie Hallford. She was on recently. She's the vice president in the client computing group at Intel. She came back on with us today to talk about a lot of the Intel news, because lots of stuff going on around vPro and Intel processor lineup. So lots to talk about. We'll talk about those later, but without further ado, let's dive in, because we've got story after story that we want to try to get to. First up, Rich, is Dell has introduced some commercial PCs and monitors for work from anywhere users. Tell us about those.
And I will do that in just a second, but I will preface this by pointing out some of what I'm going to talk about in regards to Dell. It's going to keep coming up. It was striking to me, and not really surprising if you think about it, how consistent the messaging was from all of the big PC makers, Dell, Lenovo, and HP, which are the big three, and the ones we'll be talking about on the show. They were all talking about almost exactly the same kind of stuff, and obviously, a lot of that was in the works before the coronavirus pandemic and lockdowns and so on, but a lot of it kind of relates to what we call in this headline work from anywhere computing. They're looking ahead to people being back in the office, but spending at least some of their time at home as well. And so you're going to hear a lot about video conferencing. There are a lot of video conferencing friendly features in these new devices, a lot of Dolby visuals, Dolby audio, a lot of noise reduction technology. You'll see some enhanced cameras popping up in some places. Some security functionality, including privacy shutters and things like that, keeps coming up a lot. And then another thing that came up a bunch is blue light emission reduction technology. A lot of these systems have one form or another of technology that reduces blue light emissions, and part of the thinking there is just, as we all know, we're all on Teams and Zoom calls all day long. We're actually staring into a screen more than we used to these days, because we're not doing face-to-face meetings and so on, and that can tire the eyes and so on. So a lot of these manufacturers are looking to reduce that by building in this blue light emission reduction technology. So let's talk about Dell. And all of the companies we're going to talk about, they had a ton of announcements. So we'll just kind of hit some highlights. The first device, the device that they put the most emphasis on among their commercial announcements, was the new Latitude 9420. It's got 11th gen Tiger Lake Intel processors. Almost all, I think, of the devices we're going to talk about today do. 14-inch laptop, you can get it either as a traditional clamshell or as a 2-in-1. 16:10 ratio display. There's a lot of that. We've been seeing that for a while, but there's a lot of that in particular this year. Jeff, we'll see if this qualifies as innovation in your eyes or not, but this is something that they introduced that I didn't see from the other manufacturers. They're calling it the Safe Shutter, and this is their webcam privacy shutter. And what's different about it is that it is electromechanical and automatic. And so the idea is your camera, you can set it up so that your camera is off at all times until you enter a Zoom meeting. And then the laptop automatically turns off the shutter, the camera turns on, you do your meeting. As soon as you exit Zoom, it automatically closes off the shutter for you again and restores your privacy. So you don't have to remember to do that. Is the camera on? Is it off? Or whatever. You can kind of set it up so that it's always on when you're in a meeting and you want it to be on, and it's never on otherwise. Blue light emission technology, surprise, surprise. 66% better performance, and because of the Tiger Lake processors, you're going to hear a lot about performance improvements and battery life improvements. 2.9 pounds. So this is sort of their top of the line, outside of like the XPS line of laptops, which officially are consumer laptops. In their business line of laptops, this is, I think, sort of the top of the line right now. Some monitors from Dell, 24-inch and 27-inch, a 34-inch model that Dell says is the first curved video conferencing WQHD monitor certified for use with Microsoft Teams. So this is the kind of messaging that we're hearing a lot of, and we'll hear more about. The Ultra Sharp 40 is a new Dell monitor with a built-in connectivity hub, Thunderbolt 3 and RJ45 ports built right into the monitor. You can recharge your laptop straight from the monitor, which is kind of interesting. We won't go into great detail. They have a whole bunch of new Latitude 5000 series devices. So the 9000 series is the premium line, and the 3000 series is the value line. 5000 series right in between there. Let's see. They've got some new desktops: the Optiplex 3090 Ultra and 7090 Ultra, which hide the PC component in the monitor stand, which is kind of interesting. So I'll stop there. They have a workstation. They have all sorts of stuff, but those I would say are the highlights from Dell in the commercial stuff this year.
Jeff, I'm going to let you comment first, even though I'm dying to say something, but I'm going to send it to you first.
So here's my thought on that. As far as what Rich was talking about, as far as innovation, that I'll tell you what, they should have had a shutter years and years and years ago. I don't understand why a manufacturer hasn't come up with something like this. I know at the end of the day, you can close your laptop, and I don't understand people that actually leave their laptops open with the screen and the camera and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's genius to have something where you can actually close the camera, because everybody, I don't know how many laptops I get in the shop here where I will see a piece of tape or some sort of something covering it. I know it some of the shows they've had the little sliding covers from different manufacturers and stuff like that, but they should have had an automated one that would open and close. It just makes perfect sense. As far as the rest of that stuff, not really exciting to me as far as what's out there right now. I love, I have a 34-inch ultra wide curved screen from Alienware, which is basically Dell, and it's a great monitor. And they make, I've had several of their monitors over the years, and Dell monitors, in my opinion, are some of the top of the line monitors out there. I've had them and they just last a super long time, and they're crystal clear. And I've had very, very little problems with, dead pixels or anything like that from their monitors. So
I'm going to say a couple things. One, the Latitude line has never looked better. I mean, they really have made the Latitude business line of laptops something that they used to be ugly as sin. Jeff, if you remember, they were terrible, but they really, really do look nice now. Like any employee would love to have one of those. Two, I like the idea of an electromechanical shutter. I really do. But I want to take a step back though, and go back to the whole reason why we need privacy shutters. on laptops, and which is why, Rich.
Because you don't want somebody turning on your camera and watching you do who knows what.
Right. So we ended up putting in these privacy shutters because a hacker could remote into a laptop and they could electronically start the camera and spy on you. So we ended up going to privacy shutters to remove that ability for the hacker to reach through and physically remove the cover from in front of the camera. Although now we're just reintroducing an electronic means of opening the camera. So I don't see how this is an improvement. I look at this as a regression. The first piece of spyware that will be written to target this will just mimic a Zoom meeting, so the camera turns on.
Now, the only thing I'll say about that, though, there's something physical that you can look at when it's closed or open, so that at least it gives you an awareness as the end user of looking at, oh, wait a minute, why is my shutter open? That shouldn't be.
Well,
open.
that's a good. Is it? Can you actually see the shutter, Rich? Like there's no picture of like what that actually looks like. I just assumed it was like a little tiny one that was like inside the camera,
like an iris or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point.
But that's a good, like, if so I'll take that back a little bit. If there is an actual physical shutter that you can visibly see open when it's not supposed to be open. But I think the whole point of the privacy shutter was to give something that was impossible for the hacker to control. And if going back to an electronic means of shutter control just means the hacker can find a way to control it again. So that seems weird to me.
And I'll say this too, like I said earlier, when you talk about, number one, you shouldn't have a laptop sitting in your bedroom because that's just weird. Number two, even if you do have the laptop in your bedroom, then you shouldn't have the laptop open. You should have it. It's really easy to close, before you go to bed or whatever. You don't have to have that thing open. So I don't understand the people that are like leaving these things in spaces and leaving them open when it's really easy to shut them down. But I like the point of, if you're sitting in front of it physically and using it, and all of a sudden you see the shutter open, you'd be like, "Ooh, hey, what's going on here?" So to me, it's a
hacker, man. Hello. And then you can stand up and turn around and moon them, right?
That's right. There you go.
At least you know when to do something crass that they don't want to see.
Right.
Yeah. So that was my comment on that. I love to look at the shutter tech, and if it's something that's kind of obvious when it's on, like, that's cool. But if it's not obvious,
that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Then I don't think that's a good thing. Two, the monitors. Like, okay, Jeff, I like to make predictions on this show. It is incredibly smart in the world of Thunderbolt, where like one cord connects to something and then it can do all kinds of stuff, to have things like Ethernet and hubs built into monitors. Brilliant, right? I want to see every Thunderbolt monitor going forward with an RJ45 port and at least 3 USB ports and maybe an SD reader. That is brilliant. What do you think?
I'm a little old school. I'm not as old school as far as taking separate audio components, receivers and cassette decks and stuff like that. Yeah, look it up if you kids don't understand what that is. But CD players and all that kind of stuff. So now I've gotten to a point where I kind of like everything all in one unit, but it also makes me a little cautious because I think about some of the things and I go, okay, if that port goes, then what do I have to do? Where on a computer, on a PC, I can replace that port a lot of times, not a problem, with another, plug-in card. Or not even, a lot of times you can just use a USB dongle and make it's real simple. Even on a laptop, you can do that. So I don't know. As far as, I think the readers and stuff should be on monitors, but here's the thing. I've had readers on the last several generations of my Dell monitors right in the thing anyways. RJ45, I don't know.
Well, so many laptops don't come with Ethernet ports anymore. And if I'm thinking of like for a business, why make the employee put in a little hub to get an Ethernet port to be on a LAN? Because Jeff, if there's anything we can agree on, LAN is better than wireless.
Absolutely.
without a question, right?
Without a question.
But I would love to have on my desk here, like assuming I was a remote worker with a laptop and I plugged in or whatever, be cool if like all of that stuff was plugged right into the screen. So when I plug in, then it's all there and I don't have to worry about separate RJ45.
Right.
But I like the idea of
seeing,
I think the concept here is I like seeing a little bit more built into the monitor. You know, like
Okay.
it makes sense for monitors to have webcams, right? It makes sense for anything that's infrastructure related, mice, keyboard that you plug into. It's kind of nice if it's plugged into the monitor, so you don't have all these different connections you got to make every time you plug in. My thinking.
Now, my question would be, and I don't know if Rich or you might know this, but as far as the Latitude line, and I really haven't paid attention, but I think they all still come with Ethernet ports on the business line side, I believe.
They probably do.
Because I know the consumer stuff that I get, you know, the thinner laptops and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, a lot of those are missing. You look at the XPSs and all that. They're kind of a pain to work on because you do have to use, if you want to do a hardwire, which I normally do if I'm downloading updates, because over Wi-Fi is just horrendous. Even with my good Wi-Fi here, it's still faster with LAN. So I'm going to definitely plug those in and push that stuff through.
Good stuff. Yeah, we're diving off into the weeds. There's also what do people expect with you and I talking about?
I love technology. It's hard.
There's a Precision 3560 mobile workstation they introduced. That's kind of worth taking a look at. But lots of other stuff. So we'll put a link into this post here to look at some of the different stuff that Dell announced. Well worth checking into. Rich, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next big vendor who had some CES related announcements, and that's Lenovo.
Yes, yeah. So I'll kind of put the last. I mean, in some ways, the least exciting announcements from Lenovo at CES this year is they have a new generation of the ThinkPad X1 Carbon and a new generation of the ThinkPad X1 Yoga convertible. So a lot of the themes that I told you to hear a lot about earlier on, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos speakers, they also have, those two devices have something called Dolby Voice technology, which at least hasn't been kind of highlighted by other manufacturers in their devices. And it's designed to produce clearer audio that makes the people on the other end of a video conference appreciate you a little bit more. You're easier for them to hear. They've got the noise suppression in those devices. So many people do. They also have something that they call dynamic leveling functionality that automatically adjusts for speakers for users based on how far away they are from the device. So if you're further back during a video conference, they'll kind of turn up the gain a little bit on the microphone. If you're closer to the microphone, they'll tune it down and kind of keep you at a steady level throughout the conversation.
Does it also automatically adjust your medication levels too?
Yeah. There's a port for that actually in the device. So as long as you've got that thing plugged right into your bloodstream, you're good.
You seem agitated. Here's more Xanax.
Yeah. You're not enjoying this video conference. Let me fix that for you. Another interesting device, this is brand new, the ThinkPad X12 Detachable. And, you know, we talk about 2-in-1s all the time, but they're almost always the fold back. I don't come across detachables personally all that often. This is a brand new one from Lenovo, 12.3-inch display, optional precision pen or digital pen, and starting price is $1,149, which compared to most of the ThinkPad stuff is actually pretty good. The other brand new device, and this is sort of from Lenovo's standpoint, the big announcement in the ThinkPad line is they have a brand new device called the ThinkPad X1 Titanium Yoga, which is like the top of the line ThinkPad. Titanium case, 13.5-inch convertible design, fold back design. 11 millimeters high or thin, which Lenovo said is the thinnest ThinkPad that they have ever made. And so it's, you know, this is like the ultra premium ThinkPad now. Shiny case, very thin, very light, etc. And you will pay for all of that premiosity. It's starting price of $1,899. Dollars there. Another thing I didn't highlight before, but should have, a lot of the devices we're talking about here are 5G ready, or there are 5G ready SKUs around there. And we won't be getting into it on the show here, but I had a chance to speak with Rob Cato, who is their North American channel chief. And he said for most buyers, 5G isn't something that they like really need right now. But if you're buying a device in the next 12 months and you plan to use it for the next 2 to 3 years, you're probably going to want to know that you can connect it to 5G. So that's another very commonly seen feature in new devices this year. There are some Think books from Lenovo as well, but I will pause and let you guys chime in on the ThinkPads.
Well, I'll tell you from a podcasting standpoint, I can tell you that anything that has noise cancellation for the people that just want to use this stupid laptop onboard microphone, I welcome, because we need anything to help us. I don't understand on a Zoom call, if you sound like you're in the bathroom, that's okay. If you're in a podcast and you want to sound professional, sounding like you're sitting on the toilet is probably not the best thing to do. That's just my personal opinion. Don't get mad at me.
Unless it's a professionally produced podcast about bathrooms and toilets, then it would make sense.
The other thing I have is, okay, let's be honest. And Rich, you alluded to this. The 2-in-1s, the convertibles, the blah, blah, blahs, whatever you want to call them. I don't really see those in the wild, and I don't see a use case scenario because, again, I'm a little old school. So if I have a laptop for doing work, I will tolerate a little 14-inch maybe laptop. But you also have this thing called tech neck when you're, constantly looking down at these small screens and getting a crook in your neck. The other thing too is if I'm going to use something for entertainment, I'm going to have a, maybe a 10-inch, some sort of, an iPad or something like that, or a Amazon Fire. I will take that as my entertainment device where I'll kind of do the lean back experience, and I set up this little, tablet to watch a show or do something like that. I understand the concept, but I just feel like the people that buy the convertibles, they probably still use it primarily as a laptop. And I just don't see that technology going forward. I could be wrong. I rarely am, but I could be wrong in this particular case.
I will say I am coming to you now from an HP convertible with the fold back screen. And you're right. I mean, I almost never take advantage of that. Every now and again, I'll put it into tent mode if I want to, for some reason or other, watch video on it. Whenever I am constantly shopping for my next laptop, I just love to kind of, think about which one I would want next. And I don't need, it doesn't have to be another convertible like that. Because it's a nice to have, but it hasn't really been a necessity for me.
Now, I will say one of the things, sorry, man. One of the things that I do like about the modern laptops, and it's, again, going off the weeds a little bit, touchscreens. Because what I noticed is when I had a non-touchscreen laptop, I'm so used to touching my phone and tablets all the time that I would laugh. I'd be showing my wife something on a laptop and I'd go to grab the screen and scroll something. And it's like, what am I doing? It doesn't work. So now that I have a touchscreen laptop, I didn't think I would use it. I actually do use that portion of it. So there's that.
Totally agree with it. I know lots of people who don't have never owned a touchscreen laptop, and they're like, why would I want that? Why? But I'm just telling you, once you've had it, you can never not have it going forward. And I do exactly what you do, and especially like you go to conferences. Once we go back to face-to-face conferences, a lot of time there's a laptop that you use to register. And I don't know how many times I put my finger on that and nothing happens. What the hell? This thing's broken. So yeah, you get used to that once you've got it.
Yep, I agree.
I didn't find touchscreens very useful, or at least the 2-in-1 kind of stuff, until I had a digitizer with an actual digitizer pen. Then I found a little bit of use out of them, but not a lot. But Rich, it's really weird to sit here and look at like not one, but 3 new X1s. And I remember when the X1s were they were mind-blowingly amazing. And it was like, wow, look at that. But it's like, oh, here's 3 of them. Yay. Seen this, done that, got the t-shirt. The titanium one looks nice. Not going to blow anybody away. I am a little more interested in the detachable, because we haven't seen a lot of detachables over the years. Lenovo did one that I think I reviewed a long time ago. Microsoft has their Surface detachable, and that's been kind of the industry mainstay, the one to go to. that really has kind of been the only one that I can really think of for quite a while. So it'll be cool to see Lenovo kind of dive into the detachable form factor again, because I love it when they experiment and do cool stuff. So I think the X12 is very interesting. But I don't think there's really much else to talk about the X1s. I mean, it's more X1s. They're awesome, but we've kind of seen these before.
Yeah, they are beautiful machines. They're for sure. They are. I mean, and as far as PCs, modern PCs nowadays, laptops, whatever, a lot of these companies are actually, in my opinion, competing with Apple as far as form and fit, fit and finish, and they are putting some beautiful pieces of work together. When you get into the more, I tell people, and I think we've talked about this before on a couple other shows, but I've told people before, hey, listen, if you're going to buy a laptop, you're going to spend about $700, or you're just going to buy something that you're going to replace in a few years. And it's it'll give you about a good 1 year worth of, where it works really well. And then it starts getting to that point where there's a lot of cruft and it stops working as well. So there's kind of a midpoint. And I tell people, if you don't want to do that, just buy a desktop, because we can hand build that for you, and you'll have it. You can replace the components, no problem. And, be up and running, as long as you don't need that mobility.
Yeah. All right, Rich. I am a little more interested to talk about the ThinkBook line, because that's been a line that's grown very, very popular in the SMB space. And that's been a traditionally smaller line, but it's obviously growing and growing and growing, because it is a very nice blend of the consumer style, consumer use case kind of notebooks with a little bit extra rigidity and features that are more SMB focused. What's in this line?
Yeah, well, and I'll just follow up on what you're saying right there, because in that conversation I mentioned before with Rob Cato, he said that they've had a lot of success. They're very happy with the way the ThinkBook line has sold since they introduced that, and it's a little over 2 years, 2.5 years maybe old at this point. And you're right, originally it was like 3 different models, and there were a bunch of new ThinkBooks that came out last year, and a bunch of new ones that they're introducing now. The one that I'll maybe zero in on, because this is the one that Lenovo is most excited about, is a new one called the ThinkBook Plus Gen 2i.
And that just rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, I know. It's like we need an acronym, but it's... Yeah.
No, we don't. Absolutely not. We don't need an acronym. We don't need any more stupid acronyms. Not in this business.
Yeah, this would not be a good one anyway. The 2E, I don't know. 13-inch device. This one, and this is like the next generation, generation 2. This is an enhancement of a ThinkBook that they introduced earlier. And the distinctive design point on this is that there is an e-ink display on the outside of the device, on top of the lid, basically. And you can use that, for taking notes and some really kind of light productivity and so on. So in the new, this Gen 2i that they announced this week, that e-ink display has a 68% screen-to-body ratio versus 48%. So they've made it significantly bigger. It now provides 12 inches of usable workspace. Faster refresh rate as well. It's the exact same refresh rate, in fact, as the interior display, which is interesting. The interior display has a 90% screen-to-body ratio. It used to be 78% in the previous model, so more real estate to work with there, too. Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos speakers, again, that's showing up everywhere. 13.9 millimeters high, just under 2.9 pounds. They are saying up to 15 hours of battery life, which is actually at the higher end of the range. Most of the devices we've been talking about, they're saying like 12 to 14 hours. For this one, they're saying up to 15 or up to 24, actually, if you're only using the e-ink display. Starting price of $1,549, though, which is interesting because I think that is exactly the same starting price as the new X1 Carbon. And part of the idea with the ThinkBooks going in was, SMB oriented, meaning, and, stylish. So for people who want something that kind of looks cool, but also at maybe a reasonable price point. And so interesting that they've got now a sort of top of the line ThinkBook that starts at $1549. Bunch of other devices. I don't know if any of the others jumped out at you, Matt, but I'll stop there and let you guys chime in.
Really interesting to see an integrated e-ink display, Jeff. And I don't know what to think of this, but it's cool. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things where I'm sitting there, I'm hearing Rich talk about it. I'm looking at the pictures online, and I'm thinking, if you're going to take notes, because one thing I always hated about taking notes personally for me, and this is a personal thing, is I always hated my handwriting. It was messy. It was unorganized. It was a mess. So if you can take something where you can jot it down and it's going to take that, I'm assuming it will probably take those notes and put it into a type of format, using OCR or something like that. And so I like the idea. I'm just wondering if people are going to use, you got to get people to use it. And that's the hard part. Cause you know what you can do? You can actually, and it has unlimited battery life. And that's use a notepad to jot down notes.
Yeah.
But I see
you're going to use dead tree fiber to write on.
I know. But I see it from a standpoint, like I said, if you can take that and go, use an OCR and actually have it put it into regular text. And so you're not having to write notes and then type it in your computer later. There might be some use for that. Now, as far as artists and stuff like that, if you wanted to sketch up a drawing or something, I think that's beautiful. It really looks interesting. I want to see what the adoption is going to be.
Well, I think it'll be nice for those who like to do a lot of reading on their laptops. Like this is ideal for someone who travels and maybe carries like a Kindle Paperwhite with them, because usually e-ink provides a much better reading experience. It's much more comfortable than LCD. So it's neat. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. Not a whole lot else stood out to me, other than the 16P Gen 2. Looked like a really nice one. Much better display than what you've generally seen in the in the ThinkBook line. You can get this with RTX graphics, NVIDIA separate graphics, so they kind of have a nice productivity, creativity, workhorse kind of machine in the ThinkBook line, better than what's been in the line before. So all good stuff. I think what we'll do is send people over to the post to check out the few that we've talked about. So if you're listening online, go to the show notes page for episode 172. It's at channelpronetwork.com. Or if you're watching on YouTube, open up the description area and you'll see these links. And then there's another link in this post, Rich, to go and see like 6 other models of the ThinkBook line. So the ThinkBook line has just exploded in size over the last few weeks. So that's great stuff. Let's switch gears. We've got about 20 minutes left with Jeff. I want to try to get through as much as we can. HP, the other big maker at CES, what do they got?
A ton of stuff. In the interest of time, I'm going to focus in on 2 particular devices because they had a whole bunch of products that they introduced this week. Included among them, there were 2 different versions of the HP Elite Dragonfly. This is a device that debuted, I'm pretty sure, in 2019. It was, at the time, I think they said it was the lightest business grade laptop out there. I don't know that they claim that now. They have a G2, a second generation of that product that came out at CES this week. Weighs in just over 2 pounds, very light. But there was another Dragonfly model that I'll kind of call attention to instead, and that is the new HP Elite Dragonfly Max, which is an all-new kind of SKU of the product. And that is, they've sort of given you super specs all around, but a lot of those specs have to do specifically with video conferencing. So it has an integrated 5 megapixel plus IR camera, 4 wide range microphones with AI driven audio optimization, the blue light technology we've talked about and seen elsewhere. And they didn't, I believe, well, I'll double check, but I don't think they announced pricing on that one, but it's a
Not
safe
that I
bet.
see, but I'm going to guess 1900 is going to be my guess. Rich, tell me if I'm right or wrong.
And it might even be more than that. Because I'm wondering what you got to assume the Dragonfly Max is a little bit more expensive than the Dragonfly G2, and I wouldn't be surprised if the G2 is in that. Well, maybe not. You might be right. You might be right. 1900. Maybe the G2 is going to be a little under that. That, if I remember right, that one weighs just a little bit more than the Dragonfly G2, but then you kind of get some of these souped up specs
It's in the name. It's Max, so it's got to be heavier.
Yeah, exactly. They got to live up to that brand. The other device I'll call attention to, because it reminds me a little bit of one that we used to talk about years ago, and I forget, unfortunately, what the name of that device is. You might remember which one I'm thinking of. But there's a new device called the HP Elite Folio, which is designed to kind of combine features of a laptop, a phone, a tablet into one very mobile-friendly kind of device with the screen that folds all the way back. 24 and a half hours of local video playback, they say. 13 and a half inch screen. What jumped out at me about this, so again, they view this as this kind of hybrid PC tablet phone. This one has got a Snapdragon, a Qualcomm processor. And almost everything we've talked about has had Intel processors. The ThinkBook 16P you were talking about has an AMD Ryzen in it, and there's a 14-inch model that also, everything else has been Intel 11th gen. Here is an ARM processor on a PC, which is kind of interesting. So those are the two.
Can I ask a question on this? Is this running Windows or is this running Android?
Because I'm under the impression it's running Windows.
Okay, I mean, because Windows can run on Snapdragon, but that usually means that the x86 performance isn't very good. So I'd be interested to see if that's Windows or if that's Android. But anyway, continue on, sir.
No, those are the two. Like I said, there are a bunch more. Those were the two I figured I would kind of spotlight.
So, Jeff, to me, I think the Folio is kind of the more interesting one. And if you wanted to imagine, those who are listening, what the form factor looks like, imagine a tablet connected to kind of like one of those attachable keyboard cases where you kind of like props the tablet up, but it's all kind of built together. I like it. This is a really interesting approach that's definitely more geared towards using it more like a tablet than a laptop. Because if your goal is to use it more as a laptop, this is the wrong form factor for you, I think. The Snapdragon side is interesting. I will be interesting to hear if it's running Windows, which it can run Windows on a Snapdragon processor, or if it's Android. But this looks like one of the first real mobile, true, like other than the Surface line, which is still more of a tablet, but it doesn't have the cool like built-in fold-over stuff. And it's got a pen, which looks nice. Jeff, what do you think of the Folio?
It's interesting. My wife has a Dell Latitude 11-inch. I can't remember what the name of the line is, but anyways, it's basically a Windows tablet with the detachable, cloth keyboard with the little nice keys in there. And she's got a dock, and I've got it hooked up to a 55-inch screen TV, and she never uses it. Just doesn't get you. It's one of those things that it's like she can come in my office and grab one of the PCs that are behind me and pop on one of those and do what she needs to do, and it's all good. The one thing that I do remember, and I don't know if this is still the case because I really haven't looked at it in a while, Windows on any type of tablet form, in my opinion, sucks. It's just, I'm sorry. It's not very user friendly. I don't think.
It's funny. It's one of those things where Windows 8 was definitely superior.
Yes.
To Windows 10 when it came to mobile form factor.
I agree. And that would have been fine. And I think when a lot of these came out, that's what they did. Now, not to say, like I said, I haven't used one in a few years. My wife sits there on her desk and she doesn't use it. So it just sits there. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And I'm curious too about the Snapdragon, because the Snapdragon, like you said, that's a very lower end processor as far as running x86, and
because they got to emulate x86.
Yeah, so that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, so if it is Windows, it'll be interesting to see what the performance is with actual other non-dedicated Snapdragon optimized apps. So. Right. Interesting stuff. The Elite Dragonfly Max looks awesome. If you like the X1, you're going to like the Dragonfly Max. It looks beautiful, looks great. The Dragonfly looks great. HP's making a lot of great laptops, man. But nothing that's like, wow, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Right.
A lot of iteration.
Yes.
Rich, anything you like these? Is one of these your next laptop?
Well, I'm very interested. I don't know about the Dragonfly Max as opposed to the Dragonfly G2, but I am very interested in the Dragonfly. You know, oddly enough, one of the differences between the Max and the G2, the original Dragonfly and the G2 are both only available in this sort of metallic blue color, which you either like or you don't. You know. But the Max is now available in black. This will be the first Dragonfly. If you just want black, you can do that with the Dragonfly Max.
You know, Rich, there's one other one that I wanted to point out because we don't see a ton of them, like real good Surface competitors. But the Elite X8, the Elite X2 G8 looks like a really nice, if you want a tablet first form factor, it looks really, really good. Really thin, really light. Something I think that people should also check out.
I'm looking for the picture. Yeah. Well, and it's not a detachable, right? But it's vaguely reminiscent of the Surface, isn't it?
It's a Surface clone, basically. But I like the screen shape. I like the size. I like the stand. It looks really nice, and it looks like it has a really nice trackpad in it too. So I didn't read up a whole lot on that when I was just kind of scrolling down. I'm like, oh, I like the way that looks. And those, there's some Elite books in here, a new Elite book X360, which is a real popular one. So lots of great stuff from HP. Go check the link out and check out all the different stuff that they offer because they got all kinds of stuff in here. We got 9 minutes left. Let's go ahead and before we go to our interview with Stephanie Hallford to talk about a lot of the stuff that Intel's got going on. AMD also had plenty to talk about as well, including.
Are they still around?
they're around. They're doing pretty well, I would say these days. Rich, go ahead and introduce this because they also had a lot to talk about.
Yeah, and I mean it'll be a very high level introduction for me because this is not my specialty when you start getting into the processors. But I put this on the show sheet for today, kind of to get some feedback, some input from you guys about is this interesting? Is it kind of incremental or what? They have new Ryzen 5000 series mobile processors, a whole bunch of those, 17% faster multi-threaded performance, up to 23% single-threaded performance, up to 8 cores and 16 threads, based on the Zen 3 architecture. Gosh, we're already up to Zen 3. A couple of different desktop processors, and then and I was particularly curious to get input from you guys on this. They have 3 new AMD Ryzen Threadripper Pro models with up to 64 cores. To me, it looks like high-powered stuff, but I don't really know how to compare it. I haven't actually looked to compare it to the previous generation of Threadrippers, so I'm not sure if the new Threadripper Pros really are significantly more powerful than what they replaced. But that in a very small nutshell is what AMD highlighted this week.
So the news here is Zen 3 is coming down to mobile. This is the first time that's happened. They introduced the Zen 3 core months ago. It's been a while for their desktop line processors. So that's bringing that performance downstream into the mobile line. That is a big deal. I haven't seen any benchmarks yet on how these perform, but if it's 16% more single-threaded performance, if what they're saying here is good, the battery life improvement is also very notable. This is a pretty big battery improvement over Zen 2, and Zen 2 was already pretty good, but this is pretty significant. So, Intel has a lot to talk about with their mobile lineup as well. They have their new Core H. We're going to talk a little bit about that with Stephanie Hallford, and they've got some other mobile cores and processors that they've unveiled. Their approach is a little different. I mean, they seem to be very task oriented, and they have a lot of work around AI to optimize. So, when we start to look at raw benchmarks versus real world performance, I think that's where we're going to start to see some differences between AMD and Intel. But I'm very excited to see how these new Zen 3 based Ryzen mobile processors perform in the real world, and we'll just be watching for benchmarks as they come out, because it's kind of hard to really compare until you start to see actual numbers. Jeff, you excited about Zen 3 on mobile?
Yeah, anything you can do to improve mobile, I think is good. And as we all know, mobile processors lag way behind desktop processors, and they have for many, many years. I tell you what, I'm looking at some of these AMD, and don't get me wrong, I love AMD. I was I was an AMD nut back in the early 2000s, and I built all my machines with AMD, and I had high hopes for them. It's like a lot of the manufacturers nowadays, to be honest with you, they're all about the same. You're going to get, little extras here, here and there. You got pros and cons to everything, but as far as a processor, they're going to work. The only other thing, the thing I don't understand is the clock speed of the frequency is that, we're going to all these cores, and I 64 cores on one of their Threadrippers. And I'm like, okay, if I was doing CAD, which is a small use case scenario, very, very small use case scenario, but it does happen. People do still use CAD or programs like that. Yeah, that would benefit me. If I was a gamer, then there's really no games out there. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no games out there that use any more than 4 cores, as far as I know.
Well, Threadripper's not really aimed at gamers, though, specifically.
Okay.
That's more aimed at high data intensity workflow stuff.
Even that, I went from just a little side story, and I can go a few extra minutes past the hour too if we need to. But I had and I just lost my train of thought after I said that.
Because you got excited that you get to stay on with us a couple more minutes. How about that? So I think like the Ryzen 9 is kind of more the gamer oriented stuff.
But even then, the clocks, we're going to pull back the clock speed, right? But we're going to give it more cores. Is that better or worse when it comes? Because here's the thing:
they're optimizing the pipelines to do a lot more per clock cycle too.
Does it change anything on the desktop? I guess that's where I kind of.
Well, not really. I mean, I don't know what's new in the Ryzen 9 5900, but it's. I don't. This is a bigger discussion. I don't know. I don't think we can be able to dive into the weeds on this, and we need benchmarks really to kind of see. Yeah. I want to point out though, which is interesting, is that they really announced Zen 3 in the Ryzen 5000 series, but there are some Zen 2 parts in that lineup. So if you're out shopping and you want the latest, be cautious with what you're looking at if you want to have the latest and greatest tech on there. But lots of stuff at the high end. I'm interested to see how the mid range performs. Like the Ryzen 7 5800H looks like it'd be a good one to see. So anyway, we'll check out that later. Rich, you want to dive in and talk about processors anymore? Like, I know that this is like your bread and butter.
He loves processors.
Yeah. I've been waiting for my chance to finally editorialize on processors. No, actually, and we have a very interesting processor conversation coming up actually with Intel. Yeah,
lots more to talk about there. Jeff, is there any other things you saw at CES that you want to point out or talk about?
No, I mean, I guess there's only one thing that just kind of, as I was reading through some of the news feeds on CES and what people were talking about, I did hear mention, because obviously the car manufacturers, and I work in the car industry, they are, trying to push the electric car. And one of the things I did see in one of those articles was, and I think it was from GM, and they're talking about, doing flying automobiles or flying vehicles. And I'm here to say, we already have flying vehicles. They're called aircraft. And so now I know you and I were talking earlier, Matt, but we were talking about if we could make this to where like a hovercraft where you had, and we've seen the videos, right, where a car comes out of the garage, basically four rotors come out, it goes up and then, flies to your destination, sets down, you pop out, you go into work. And if they can come up with something like that, that will be cool. Will it be in my lifetime? Probably not. I'm still waiting on hoverboards. They were supposed to be here years ago. I don't know, give me the flying hoverboard. I don't understand why they're not here yet, but that's really what I want. That would be more exciting to me than flying vehicles. But anyways,
we digress. The flying cars, like, I mean, we were joking before the show started, like they've been working on flying cars since 1950s. Like, who knows when that's actually going to happen? But we shall see. So there's two things that I want to talk about, and I think Jeff will be able to fit it in before you have to run. One, Asus had a lot to talk about, and Asus is generally very gamer focused at CES. That's when they put their best foot forward. They had some other businessy kind of stuff that they talked about, but one that I thought was worth mentioning was the Republic of Gamers Zephyrus Duo 15 SE GX551. Another one of those names that just rolled up. I'm gonna put that up on the screen here for you guys to take a look at, and I want to point this one out because it's a form factor that I'm starting to see a little bit more creativity with multi-screens kind of being built into laptops. Really cool stuff. This one is not particularly new. They did have a design like this last year where this kind of area above the keyboard is like a small screen. And it was, I saw it last year, but it was flat against the keyboard. And a lot of the complaints were that you couldn't really see it very well when you were working. And this is kind of showing a gamer perspective, but there is a productivity case to be made. And I'm going to put this on the screen here too, kind of for this guy working on, looks like he's doing some audio mixing or something. But if you notice, they've changed this design so that way that bottom screen now pops up a little bit. And so that means you can actually see it, and that can kind of be your dock for controls and tools. And I think for creativity professionals, that's kind of a cool, nifty extra workspace to be a little more productive. What do you guys think?
I think it's pretty slick. Yeah, I'm thinking DJs and stuff like that could use that out in the real world, and have, like you said, I know a lot of times DJs they'll set up their equipment on a laptop or whatever, and then they're running around with an iPad, dialing in the sounds and stuff like that. But to have everything all in one, and there would probably be a lot of use case scenarios for that, and maybe even from a standpoint. And I didn't really. I'll have to look at the article later, but it looks like you could do some enhancements on games. Like if you had a different a touch control menu while you're playing a game with a keyboard and mouse that would be easier to touch than the keys on the keyboard, I can also see the use case scenario for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of games that customize for that second display where a lot of the controls and spells, if you're doing like an MMO game, can be kind of down there. I was thinking like, if I was working in Premiere Pro or Photoshop, I can have assets kind of down there, or my tool, like, brushes and stuff that I can easily select without having to have it in my workspace. So I think that's cool. And now that it kind of pops up and you can see it, I think that's neat. So I wanted to mention that one. I get one other mention, and that one is something that is just being talked about that I see in forums and stuff right now that kind of took people by surprise, and something that Razer announced. And I don't want to say announced because they didn't say it's actually coming to the public, but it was like a concept that they showed off. And that's called Project Hazel. Rich, did you see anything about Project Hazel?
I did not. I'm going to look it up.
So I'm going to put it on the screen here for you. So basically what Project Hazel is what they're calling the world's smartest mask. And what they've done is, I think they're saying, well, if in the future masks are here to stay, why settle for the old basic cloth face diaper when we can take our excellent technologies here at Razer and over-engineer the crap out of it? And of course, because it's Razer, add like fancy lighting and RGB, customizable RGB lighting. But basically, it's an N95, a dual N95 mask with a clear cover, so you can see the person's mouth, all fit with RGB lighting. And then there's like some kind of system that's built in here to move the air in and out. I was kind of reading about it, but I'm like, that's interesting. That if masks are indeed here to stay, we might be seeing technology try to make them better.
I did actually see this earlier this week. I was unfamiliar with the Project Hazel name. I would just read something about smart masks and read a little bit about it, and it felt, once I saw that, it felt almost inevitable. Like, how did I not see this coming? CES 2021, there would be at least one smart mask there. Yeah. So
now I also want to take the opportunity, Rich, before we let Jeff go, to announce that I secretly in my basement have also been working on my own concept for a smart mask. Okay. And I'm calling it Project Bane. So this is my idea for the future of smart masks.
There you go. I like that. That's good. As far as a technological standpoint, though, I will say this: the number one thing that we have a hard time with masks right now is when you're out in the wild and you're trying to talk to somebody, especially as you start to get older, and even before that, everybody goes, "Huh? What'd you say? What? Huh? What?" And so I think part of the technology in that mask that I had read was they also have some sort of enhancement so that your voice actually comes out of one of those ports or something like that, so people can hear you clearer. Plus, it has a clear face shield, so people can see your lips moving. And I think that's something else that we miss all the time.
I forgot about the microphones. That it had a mic array built in.
Right.
And in my own personal life, I've noticed that as an issue, that like it is really a lot harder to understand people.
Now, quite honestly, when you have a mask on, though, when I'm sticking my tongue out at people, they don't know. So it's kind of a safety thing, but
it is. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now, to be clear, folks, Razer did not say that is a product that's actually coming to real life fruition or that is going to be released, but it just shows that the world is changing, and there's a good chance it's all here to stay. Welcome to hell. And that's why I think they should all look like Bane's mask.
There you go.
Anyway, so Jeff, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking CES with us. I know if we had another hour, I mean, we could just keep on rolling through CES stories because there's always a lot of stuff to talk about. So Jeff, for people who want to catch you or learn more about you or catch the MSP Unplugged podcast, where can they go?
So you can, if you want to email me, you can email me, jeff@mspunplugged.com. You can also go to mspunplugged.com. Catch me over there. We have our own YouTube channel. You can go to MSP Unplugged over on YouTube. You can download us on your favorite podcatcher. We're pretty much everywhere, Spotify, all that kind of good stuff. Stitcher, so on and so forth. And also last thing too is we're attempting to throw a conference this year, an actual physical conference. So if you're in the IT field and you're interested in something like that, where we get together and share ideas and learn from each other, you can go to techconunplugged.com and check us out over there. And I think we'll have a little thing in ChannelPro magazine here, probably coming up here soon. So appreciate you guys having me on the show today, and it's been fun. And I wish I had more time because I love to talk about the innovations or non-innovations and all the electronics that are out there. We need to do this more often. We need to you should have a separate segment, I think.
I like the idea of doing a couple hardware special editions, but we'll see how that goes. Jeff, always a pleasure. We always love having you on. This won't be the last time. And we will see you soon. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have an interview set up here with Stephanie Hallford from Intel. We're going to go through a lot of Intel news, a lot of stuff around vPro, a lot of stuff around processors. It's really interesting stuff. And then Rich and I will be back on the other side. We'll see you in just a few. And welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. We have got an awesome special guest lined up for you this week. And actually, I guess we've seen pretty recently, in fact. But we're excited to have her back. As we all know, in a few episodes ago, we had the Stephanie Hallford on. She's the vice president in the Client Computing Group and the general manager of business platforms at Intel. And we have invited her back again today because CES is this week, and press releases are flying everywhere. And who else would have a ton of news to cover and big things and announcements to go through than Intel? So Stephanie, welcome back to ChannelPro Weekly.
Thank you, Matt, and thanks, Rich. I'm happy to be back with you.
Glad to have you.
A busy week, lots of stuff going on, and I feel like Intel really came, with a lot of. We had, suitcases full of announcements, so that's been kind of fun to see how that's getting, played out.
So if you're going to bring announcements in suitcase form, are those carry-on size, or do you have to check those?
I think they're check-in. This year it was check-in. It was heavy. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So for those who may not have caught the last episode, can you just give us a quick little rundown about you? Tell us about you, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I run our business client platforms team. I'm the GM of that, and I report into, I'm a vice president of our client compute group. And what that is at Intel is basically our PC side of the house. So both notebooks, desktops, and certain adjacencies, that wireless and things of that nature that we include in those platforms. And my specific role is running the B2B platform team. So this is how we service enterprise and businesses with PCs.
Well, fantastic. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to start diving in because I'm sure there's a lot we want to talk about, including some interesting stuff around vPro. So Rich, do you want to set this up?
Yeah, well, as you said, Stephanie, so first of all, thanks for joining us. We are recording this smack dab in the middle of CES. Very busy week for anyone in the hardware business, especially you folks at Intel. There was all sorts of news that you folks have announced already, but the 11th Gen Core vPro and Evo vPro launches this week, I think, are probably going to be the most important announcement for folks who are listening to this podcast right now. So I'll start you out with the big, wide open question here. I mean, from an Intel perspective, how significant is this particular edition of vPro? It's obviously not your first. How significant is it, and what's significant about it?
Yeah, it is very significant. We worked really hard to make sure that a few things we would pull in our corporate launch to this January timeframe because we were so eager to get out our 11th gen version. So, we worked with all of our OEM partners to really accelerate their ability to get on this new platform because 11th gen just offers huge leaps in performance. And in addition, we've worked on some security, which we'll go into, some security, manageability, and other elements, of value. But the key here right now is that we've got new security capabilities that we've been able to bring out in this 11th gen. It used to be called Tiger Lake was our code name. And then 11th gen itself, that processor family is just jam-packed with performance. And the combination is allowing us to bring huge leaps to business customers, both end users and IT professionals who have to service those end users.
There are a number of different things about vPro that we should talk about, and you mentioned security. I do want to make sure that we do that. But one of the things that jumped out at me in the briefing materials and press releases and stuff like that you put out is the emphasis you folks placed on technology in the platform that assists with video conferencing in terms of things like noise reduction and performance like you were talking about. So I mean, maybe talk a little bit about that, about how, because everybody's doing a lot of video conferencing these days. So maybe talk about what's in there that can assist with that. And then just, I'm curious to know, maybe what else in vPro is particularly relevant given the way people are working right now and will continue to work.
Yeah, I'd say there's two things. Number one, collaboration and productivity was a huge focus for us. And we really, we do a lot of things behind the scenes with our AI accelerators, tuning and working with partners to make sure that end-to-end experience is, fully realized. So for example, if you, for instance, are on Office 365 with a background blur, you're editing a video, and of course you're on Teams, communicating at the same time. All of that is a reality. This is something you and I could easily be doing today. Well, we tested that entire end-to-end example, and we are over 20%, 23% faster in that setting. And if you think how many times you do that a day, that's real productivity gains and real benefit to users. So we've taken a very real world performance or real world work life, realities and tested and tuned the systems to go around that. So while benchmarks are important, we all know that that's a spec, but what really matters is how are we experiencing our day-to-day, our day-to-day realities. So 23% faster in that example. We've got overall 38% better overall performance than competition. And we are close to 2 times faster. I think it's 1.8 times faster in video editing, on Adobe, for instance, which is a commonly used, editing tool. So we really, I think when you ask about the video collaboration, we did 2 things. We sat back and said, rather than just throw out a bunch of numbers, let's figure out what we do in a day and how do we make that experience better, faster, and then more secure. And that would be the second thing I would offer is the second part. So on collaboration, productivity was our one focus. The second one was really security and manageability. And that shows our two different audiences. One is the end users or the employees and their productivity and experience. And our other audience that we serve is IT. And IT needs to be able to get to all of those employees, even remotely, which is reality now, whether it be globally or just even in the same city, everyone is dispersed. How do we give tools to IT that allow them to reach those PCs remotely and make sure that they're able to patch, for instance, if something's off, or update drivers or whatever needs to be. So those were really big focus areas. So we call it sort of what IT needs and what end users want.
So let's talk a little bit about security and manageability, because obviously security is a huge concern with people working from home. Management, as you pointed out, remote management is that much more important in a work from home context. So what about vPro in this particular release, or maybe even more generally from an Intel perspective, suits it to the challenges that our listeners deal with around work from home computing?
Yeah, well, one of the exciting announcements we made on vPro this week was our control flow enforcement technology. Now, I won't ask to do a quiz and have everybody have to repeat all that back. So CET is, the shortened acronym, but what it is it's essentially a capability built into the silicon that we worked with Microsoft to enable. And it essentially allows us to identify and detect malware and block it on, using both our hardware as well as software. And I think one of the big themes that we wanted to come through at CES was the reality that software alone is just not enough. If you're really serious about security, you need a hardware software combination. And that's what one of the big announcements that we've made this week. We're the only platform out in the world today that has this capability, and we invented it actually with Microsoft and working on it for the past few years.
That's really interesting. You don't normally hear security features implemented at the hardware level, at least with detection. How is that updated as things go on? How does that stay? How does it work? What does it do?
Well, essentially, it is its ability to recognize. So what we are updating it as we do each platform. Number one. Number two is we're working closely hand in hand with Microsoft to ensure that the signals that we're able to give are recognized by the OS and are recognized if there are attacks below the OS. We're also able to, trap that memory in the encryption area and encrypt a larger surface. So it's really that combination of the software realizing the capabilities of the hardware. And the other one that we announced this week was threat detection. And that's a capability that requires partners to enable it. We talked about Windows Defender, BlackBerry Silence. You'll be seeing a lot more security partners come out and announce this year. But what that is essentially, if there's a ransomware or crypto mining attack, we're able to, with Windows Defender or Silence, actually, recognize the attack, block it, and at the same time, offload all of that resource that is being taken up by the CPU to do that. We offload it to the GPU. So you heard us talk a lot about our Iris Xe. This is the new graphics engine that we've brought about. But one of the great benefits for businesses is offloading that to a new compute, the GPU, allows the CPU to be free and continue to stay productive and manage, everything that's going on. So these are two hardware-based with software, engagement capabilities that we announced with our 11th gen vPro. So we've spent a lot of time on really how do we help get in the hands of IT things that will help them, detect and prevent before it becomes, a bigger crisis. And, I've been reading, just as you have in the news, these horrible stories about hospitals in COVID being, attacked, ransomware attacks, things of that nature. And that's just not, we don't need more challenges in the healthcare arena right now, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, the two top targets, because the people who do this stuff are such wonderful people, hospitals and schools, apparently. And in neither case do we need any more complexity than we've already got.
Yes.
You mentioned Iris Xe there. There's also deep learning boost technology in the new platform, both of which are relevant to AI, which you alluded to before as well. I mean, how big a deal is AI right now as a workload, and to what extent are you sort of preparing maybe for it to become a bigger issue down the road?
Let me tack onto that real quick too before you answer. It's not a minor update in this area or improvement. It's in like an 8-fold enhancement to AI capabilities in this new platform.
It's huge, and we've spent. This is where the 11th gen, our ability to get on this new platform was so important that we really sped up our efforts to pull in our corporate launch. As we launched the consumer line in September, either September, October. And this is a very fast corporate, we pulled in, we did a lot of work to bring in our corporate lineup, all the firmware and software and validation work we have to do. We've now pulled that in, which our IT partners have been asking for, because this is the season where they tend to refresh or get their budgets refreshed, et cetera. So it's really important to get here now. But yeah, the AI improvements have been huge. We've got a massive focus on that. How do we, again, look at real value? So noise cancellations in the background, the dog barking, the whatever it may be. A lot of these accelerants that we are able to do in the silicon layer are bringing real value as we start to expose them. It is a big focus moving forward. I think we're just beginning to see the capabilities that we can bring out in our AI capabilities. And I will say that the field is wide open, and I think it's where we tend to focus. And you'll see us in the commercial lineup continuing to focus, I think, as much as we can on improving collaboration, improving productivity. That requires performance, but also enhanced by these accelerants. And then finally, continuing to see how and where can we bring that into our manageability and security arenas.
So I mentioned before, officially, you folks are launching 11th Gen vPro, but also Evo vPro. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, help people understand the distinction between those two and what Evo vPro in particular is about.
Right. So Evo is our, best mobile capability that we offer. It's our laptop, our highest laptop experience that highly mobile users fitted for things of battery life, the best battery life you could possibly have. We verify and validate that it meets certain levels of battery life, certain display resolutions. It's got to meet certain thin and light requirements. So Evo equals experience. All of those, features and capabilities are bringing that best mobile experience. So Evo is mobile experience, verified, validated. If it's got the Evo brand, then it means that we've actually done that testing. And if our partners don't meet those requirements, they don't get the Evo badge. So that's Evo. Evo is mobile experience guaranteed. Then you've got vPro, which is really the additional manageability, security, and business expertise. So Evo vPro is all that fantastic mobile experience goodness from Evo with what businesses also require, which is that manageability, stability, and obviously security. So Evo vPro was one of our announcements this week. It's really marrying that business security and manageability with, Evo's promise, verified promise of best mobile experience.
The best part of that is when you put those together, it rhymes.
Evo vPro, I know. It used to be very difficult to roll off the tongue. Now I've said it so many times this week, I think I got it.
I was just going to say, I was actually very impressed because I know, I was saying it slowly to make sure I got it out right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little bit of a tongue twister.
I think the marketing department was working overtime on that one.
Yeah, so we're excited about that one. And I think this is where a lot of our partners have come to us, partners meaning our OEM partners. And, this is where Intel really shines, where we are that industry leader that can elevate all boats. So when we come up with something like Evo and we push, we have the capability to influence supply chains, in display, in, battery life, some of the battery components. And so when we go and put our minds to something like that and then work to push the industry to raise the level, it benefits the end users because, the OEMs come with us, they appreciate the help that we have on the supply chain, and then they're able to raise all boats and bring just better experience to customers. So Evo's a real industry-wide or industry effort by Intel, but I think it's being well received as these platforms start to roll out.
Now, one of the things you folks announced, you've got 60 different laptops coming from OEMs this year that are either vPro or Evo vPro enabled. Are there particular design points, capabilities, or something, as you look at some of those models out there, are there things they can do that really wouldn't be possible without vPro?
Yeah, I mean, without the Evo vPro, I mean, one, obviously, on the Evo side, that goodness that the Evo experience brings is this baseline of battery life. And it is that 4K display and resolution. These are bare minimums, that we have to provide. Thin and light and weight is a huge one. And the ability to handle the performance and productivity and collaboration with as much power as we pack into those thin and lights would not have been possible a few years ago. You would have never had that ability to have that level of experience with something so thin and light. So that is a huge baseline. And then finally, when you add that vPro for those Evo vPro systems, Dell announced their Latitude 9000 series, for instance. That's a perfect example of has that built-in, threat detection that I mentioned, the control flow enforcement technology, we couch all of those as part of our Intel Hardware Shield. So Intel Hardware Shield is a part of, or it's Intel security promise as part of vPro. And so, when we launch vPro, that comes out of the box. And I think that's proved to be pretty important, for most, and particularly as you start to get away from the less complex enterprises, you really need more out of the box security so that, there's less complexity, for users. But Intel Hardware Shield, just to summarize, it's really above the OS, that threat detection that I mentioned with things like Windows Defender or BlackBerry Silence. It's data and app protection. And these are, like the control flow enforcement technology, things of that nature that I discussed that we coordinate with Microsoft and other OS vendors. And then below the OS is our protection, memory encryption, and the work that we do to encrypt. So Intel Hardware Shield is going to evolve with each platform. 11th gen has been a big step forward, but it's really around those three elements: below the OS, data and app protection, and then above the OS. And because you can get into feature soup and alphabet soup very, very quickly, we couch all of that, as Intel Hardware Shield. And that's a big focus of our vPro promise.
Now, vPro was the big news this week, but it wasn't the only news. So we should touch on some of the other things that you folks at Intel are talking about this week. There were some new N series processors, Pentium Silver, Intel Celeron. What's maybe exciting from your point of view about that?
Yeah, we are super excited about that line in order to really start addressing this huge demand in education that's just exploded. The education market is much more price sensitive, schools, et cetera, constantly battling funding. And so this is a lineup that I think really allows us to get into that Pentium Celeron price point that's important for schools and educators. And if you saw the press conference, we also showed a video of Chance the Rapper. You know, we've been trying to work with, he's done a lot for schools in the Chicago area. And we've been cooperating with him and his agent, his organization to, you know, provide laptops, this new N series to many of the schools that he supports in Chicago. So that's really our targeted sort of Pentium Celeron. You know, there's other target markets that could appeal to, but we're really looking at it as an opportunity to address what's just exploded this year, which is that that education demand with all the work from home and, you know, multiple devices per household. Now we've seen a huge explosion in that area.
And in in that lineup, the goal there is performance or battery life for the dollar. What's kind of the target of that particular line?
Yeah, that it is getting a balance of that performance and with the price point. So it's really making sure that we can get in, you know, the Pentium or Celeron levels of performance, which is outstanding and still is very much above competition, but in a price envelope that, you know, that suits. We also are, you know, you'll see in some of the press materials, we go through some of the benchmarks and comparisons with MediaTek. I know we've done some demos on that. And some of those players that are operating in that environment, how we're bringing that Intel performance and goodness in at a, you know, a more affordable price point.
And there was also an announcement that's kind of going after the other end of that market as well. And that I'm very interested to see Intel try to take on ultra portable gaming, because that's something that nobody's really figured out yet. And you have the Core H line to address that. That's certainly in my wheelhouse of interest. So tell me about that.
Yeah, you know, we announced the H series. Chris Walker was, you know, our lead, you know, discussing that. I think we had Frederick Homburger on as well. That is this sort of really interesting high-end ultra portable gaming focused on full experience, highest levels of performance in something that we can, you know, move around. And that, again, as I referred to earlier, would not have been possible a couple of years ago. It is an interesting space. And with the introduction of the H series that we announced this week, I think we've got, I can't remember if we announced how many titles, we can get that back to you, but a number of game titles that we've worked with and tuned and enabled to ensure that it's really taking advantage of all that power and graphic performance that we're bringing into that lineup. So a number of the top games have been enabled or will be enabled, you know, to make sure that they're utilizing all that performance and graphics advantage.
You know, integrated gaming graphics is not necessarily a thing that Intel is particularly known for. So what improvements here, how much effort has gone into improve the graphics stack in this? What's new?
You know, a lot. I mean, I think it's not my area of expertise, so I don't have all the background on that. But I do know that this integrated graphics, there's been a lot of internal attention on the need. You know, graphics has been in the gaming wheelhouse forever. What we're recognizing is, I think, some of the ability that we have to, again, have that GPU and CPU integration where we're able to then balance the loads and give the overall experience a better boost while we're trying to, what goes onto the GPU, what goes onto the CPU, and balancing that performance and power at the same time. But, you know, gaming is another area that continues to explode for us. And it's an area that is, even amidst, you know, economic, you know, down, you know, hardship in the last year or so, that is proven to be a pretty resilient market, that gaming market. And even in the ultra portable space, we're seeing interest. It's more niche. It's a, you know, a definite more targeted user, but we're seeing it grow. And so we're putting some real effort into that. In terms of some of the games and graphics work, I think, you know, we'll have to get back to you. I'll get Elvia to send some of that. I think it's in our press release, but I haven't been super versed in that.
There was one other forthcoming client platform you guys spoke a little bit about this week. You mentioned Rocket Lake. What is Alder Lake? How does that fit into the picture?
Oh, yes. GB did show a running Alder Lake demo as part of his surprise at the end of his press bit. That Alder Lake is going to be launching next year. It is another big step ahead for us in, both consumer and in corporate, both performance. And, he showed some of the gaming capabilities in the demo that he showed. We've got it up and running. We are excited about it. It's our 2022, next gen platform. And you'll see some interesting, stay tuned in the business space, because we've got some interesting things that we're lining up in Alder Lake. Can't disclose it yet, but you'll see a lot. We will be featured prominently at the next CES, whether that be virtual or wait and see. I hope not. That would be a sad day if we're all still suffering from all this in next year, 2022. But we will have a number of really exciting business announcements with Alder Lake.
You know what? I'm going to ask you about that, though, because we were chit-chatting off the air before we started recording the interview with some of your folks about whether or not, do we prefer the virtual CES to being in Las Vegas or not? Like, in some ways, for me, it's been a lot easier to kind of cover the event this year because I'm not running around all over the place. Would you rather be in Las Vegas this year?
I would say this year, no, definitely not. It'll be interesting. It's been like everything with this new reality. So there's been silver linings in it. And I do think, not the exhaustion that Vegas just, is, I don't miss that, and there's so much of the, you start at CS in Vegas at whatever time in the morning and you go until way later than you were supposed to. And then rinse and repeat, the next day. And so it's exhausting. It always takes a few days to recover. We all almost always get sick. I feel like everyone gets sick after CES. I don't know if it's all the germs, the shaking hands, the exhaustion, all the above. So I don't miss that. I do think what I have seen go down is, customer meetings. We're not doing as many because, they can, if it's just going to be virtual, they can do that anytime. And that's one thing that I do miss, because I end up meeting with face-to-face a lot of our customers, that are, buying vPro and understanding how they're deploying it. And, I remember last year I met with the Mormon church, and, they've got obviously, they're not called employees, I suppose, but members that are all over the world, as you go and do your 1 to 2 year evangelical, outreach and travel. And so it's fascinating to talk to their IT guys, about how do they service that? How do they, and they go all over the world into some really small towns all over Asia or Europe or Latin America. So I miss that. I miss the, the face-to-face that just really isn't happening with virtual. But I would argue my Christmas was much better because we had to do a lot of our final filming and, get things tightened up, get all of our, metrics and stats and announcements all signed, sealed, and delivered, before the holiday to meet the virtual timeline and the virtual realities. And that made for a more enjoyable Christmas holiday. So that was a plus, because I was, first part of December was hell. Second half was much more relaxing than usual.
What's funny is when you're talking about CES and all of the work and exhaustion that goes on, I couldn't help notice that, like, what after CES, you look for days exactly like that dog that's laying on the couch behind you, because that dog is like out like a light.
Can you see him?
Yeah, and it's like, for those who are watching, it's like the most adorable thing ever. Oh, he just put his head up. What's his name? Her name?
Gibbs.
What is it?
Watching Gibbs. Have you ever watched NCIS? He's the, anyway, it's a show, it's one of the few family shows we all watch. It's been on for like 20 seasons. And one of the lead guys is named Gibbs. And so he came around while we were watching the show. He said, oh, that's his name, Gibbs. There's another one, Bodie, who's a black lab. He's not here. But this is the only couch he's allowed on in the house. But I'm a softie, so it's my office.
I was worried for a second it was our discussion that put him to sleep, but I think he's just already heard all this news before. So.
Oh yeah, he's he stays in here pretty much all day. He's heard it probably 4 times by now.
That's awesome. So we're probably running out of time, but I want to ask. It's a new year. It's 2021. What do you want to make any predictions for the new year? You want to give us a little hint of what Intel might be having coming down the road, or some personal goals? What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, 2021 for me personally, I'm just hoping, as we're all healthy. That is number one top of mind, no matter what industry you're in. We're all impacted by, in some way, by, and certainly have loved ones that are impacted. So number one is health, and, getting, I think, a more peaceful coexistence, with ourselves. Those would be my big wishes for 21. I think we're all tired of, seeing just a kind of a replay. I'm hoping that, that starts to include then some return to normalcy in terms of travel and things of that nature. But I also hope that we've learned a lot from how much we can do virtually, and that we cut down a little bit of the manic franticness that travel sometimes also brings about. So I hope, we step back and we've got some learnings in 21 that we start to all benefit from. And, on the Intel side, it's going to be an exciting year. We have a lot of fire. You saw us bring it out at CES. We call it, as Tiger Lake was the code name, we call it, the Tiger Roars, and we're really got, I think, a lot of energy behind what we're bringing out now, and a lot of passion. And I think we are, at least on the client side, really, I've really enjoyed the refocus on truly user experience. And so rather than throwing technologies over the wall and trying to find a use for them, we're starting really at what is the pain point? What is the real world pain point, not the benchmark spec? And then how do we innovate, upstream from there? So that to me has been a big, a big advancement that I think we're all starting to see now. We've been seeing it over the years, but it's really starting to come to fruition now. So it's going to be a fun year. It's got to be better than 2020. That, there's only one way to go, up, I hope.
Truer words never spoken. We can only hope that we can put that year behind us and move forward.
It's been an exciting start to the year, that's for sure. So let's hope it gets a little less exciting in February, but yeah.
Indeed. Well, I know you're a very, very busy lady. So if I don't think we have any other questions, so I think we're going to part ways and say goodbye. But thank you so much for joining us here and wrapping up your CES announcements. Lots of stuff, folks. We're going to put links to some of these press releases and news stories that we write for ChannelPro Weekly, or for the ChannelPro website, and put them online for you. So make sure you go and read. There's just tons of information, details, new features, numbers, specs, all kinds of stuff. Stephanie, where else can they go to learn a little bit more about you and learn more about Intel stuff?
I think we've got a big focused effort on our Intel.com. That's probably the easiest. And we've really put a lot of content on LinkedIn and Twitter, and trying to really feed, that as well. So my handle is @Steph_Hallford for Twitter. And we, trying to get as much out as we can on that. And one of the things I would encourage all of your listeners to look into is a lot of the testimonials. We have been working hard to bring the real life stories from our partners, whether this be solution providers. I had Chuck Simmons, who's the head of the Device as a Service platform at Accenture. And he was on stage with me for our CES. And he talks a lot about how Accenture has they're a huge company with over 500,000 employees worldwide, how they use vPro internally. And then, of course, they have integrated a number of our vPro technologies into their own solutions that they service, with companies. They have thousands and thousands of companies that they, enterprises that they service worldwide. So we've got Accenture stories, and then a number of our smaller service providers and how they've utilized the ability. Intel vPro is the only platform that allows remote, ability to access PCs remotely. And so we've brought to life with, COVID and all the realities there. That's just, skyrocketed. People taking advantage of that, remote management technology to patch systems, or just to, have visibility into systems. So I'm pleased. I've been really pushing the team. Let's get more of these testimonials out, because I think it brings to life that it's not all just specs and feeds. There's real goodness that, we're providing, and particularly in the new crazy reality we're in.
Very
so
cool.
I really encourage people to go, as much as possible, look at those testimonials, and we're going to get more out through the year. There's a lot of we've got a lot more we want to say, but, testimonials, you have to go through lots of legal hurdles, make sure everybody's, comfortable with everything that's said. You don't want to say too much. So, it takes a little longer to get them out, but it's a big focus for us because I think that others tell the story better than we do.
Yeah, and it sounds like a great resource and a good way to inspire and show people how to do things new ways. So that's great stuff. So we'll make sure we have those on. Stephanie, I love having you on. It was great having you on almost back to back shows, and hopefully we'll get you back on in the future. Next time you have some new Intel things to talk about.
Yeah, love talking to you guys. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great. We'll definitely have you back. Thanks again. And for everyone else, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rich will wrap up the end of the show by looking into the future and telling us what it's been, even though this entire episode has been dedicated to kind of looking into the future. But Rich will try again. And of course, we'll recap things that may have been missed before. So stick around for that. We will be right back. And we are back with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. I'm going to wrap up the show here with some regular features that we do here at the end of the show. Rich, this has been a spectacular look at kind of the year ahead in technology with all of this stuff coming out of CES. A wonderful interview with Stephanie Hallford. A big thanks to her for coming on. Anything out of that interview that you wanted to highlight?
No, I mean, it was interesting, that we talked about a bunch of new laptops at the beginning of the show. Then we spoke to Stephanie. And I won't even go back and try to tell you which ones are on Evo vPro. But we were talking about devices earlier in the show that are directly relevant to the conversation that we just had. A lot of those devices, in fact, are on the Evo platform. And I don't know, just off the top of my head, which ones have a vPro option, but I'll bet a bunch of them do.
Yeah, it's certainly an exciting time for laptops right now. I mean, we know that we are not seeing massive amounts of innovation or like wild and crazy new things, but it's amazing how solid and how much variety and how many great laptops there are, and how the performance and battery life just keep improving thanks to companies like Intel and AMD who are really focusing on trying to make the guts a lot more efficient and powerful to make good computing experiences for everyone. So very, very cool stuff. And that dog was adorable, dude. That dog the whole time was like the cutest thing.
Yeah. Well, and if, for the folks who were watching on video, they saw Gibbs just kind of wander into the picture and settle down on the couch and go to sleep.
It was awesome. It was really, really good stuff. So big thanks again to Stephanie Hallford. Can't wait to have her back on to talk about future stuff at Intel when there's, more stuff to talk about. So Rich, normally every show, this is where we would kind of do a museum pick, but you know what, Rich? On a show that's dedicated to looking toward the future of technology, it doesn't seem right to look at the past, right? This is all about what's coming down the road. Let's not look at something old. It just doesn't fit. So what I'd like to do instead is I would like to give each of us the opportunity to highlight one thing we saw that either really wowed us or that like we think is going to be amazing, or like kind of like our own little personal coming out of CES tech pick. And some of the stuff isn't going to be available for a while, but like, as I know mine, who knows when it's going to come out, but I thought it was really cool. So I'm going to let you go first.
Well, of the devices that we talked about earlier on in the show, and I don't know that it wowed me exactly, but of all the devices we talked about, the one that probably intrigued me most was that the ThinkBook Plus Gen 2i, the one with the e-ink display on the cover. And that may be something very particular to me, but ordinarily when I'm out on the road and I'm going to conferences, I've got a laptop with me and I have an iPad with me, and I do all my writing obviously on the laptop. When I go into an interview, I pull out the iPad and that's where I take notes. And so I've been kind of thinking, would I like to have that note-taking ability in the laptop? So it's one device instead of two devices, and that's intriguing. I don't know that that's like, on the short list of the next laptop I buy, but very interesting form factor that in my particular case actually could be really handy.
Very, very could be. And that is a very interesting looking notebook that they came out with. And I like e-ink displays, particularly like I mentioned for reading. So it might be a pretty cool note-taking device to kind of simulate that on-paper feel. Even though we know Jeff mentioned that amazing, never needs to be charged technology called paper. That's just no fun, right? That's no fun.
Well, and you know what? Yeah, you leave paper out in the rain, and your notes are gone. I am just sort of like paranoid about this whole issue, and I get notes up into the cloud ASAP because otherwise they could go away, and then I'm in a lot of trouble. So yeah, a legal pad is a nice note taking tool, but it's got limitations.
It does. That's true. Is that legal pads don't sync with OneDrive, so.
Yeah.
That's always always something that you got to think of. Cool stuff. Great pick, by the way. Really interesting product. Hopefully everyone goes and check that out. My tech pick / thing that I saw that wowed me is a product that LG showed, and I'm not gonna lie. Like the last couple of years, we're starting to see bendable, foldable, flexible displays. But I haven't really seen an implementation yet that I thought like that's an improvement that we've never seen before. Like Moto's got that one that kind of closes shut. It's like a big clamshell, their Razer one with the foldable screen. The Samsung one was kind of cool because it would kind of open up into like a little bit of a wider display. But they're clunky. There's usually a crease. I'm not sure if foldables the future. Well, it might in certain cases, but LG showed off something that I'm gonna play. I'm gonna play a video here that I thought was really cool and could be the future. They're calling it the LG Rollable. So, Rich, I'm gonna go ahead and play this. Watch what happens to this. What seems like a phone, as they do this. Did you catch that?
I don't
watch this.
What is that?
So that is a phone that basically like expands upward to make it a bigger display. I'll play that again. See how it's like really kind of big right now, like more like a small tablet.
Right.
And then it can shrink down before your very eyes into a typical phone form factor.
And so what's happening there is the display is literally rolling up inside the case.
Yes. Now I think that's cool, in my opinion. If my phone like this could just magically expand up and become bigger when I need it to be, if I'm watching something or want to see more, if I need more screen real estate, it can do that. Working on an Excel, like working on spreadsheets in particular on phones is not fun. So like this is pretty slick stuff. And I like the implementation better than that because a foldable screen, it'll be perfect image. It won't crease. It's all kind of self-contained. I think that's pretty neat stuff, Rich. What do you think?
It's the exact same audience and set of use cases and so on as like the Samsung foldable and so on, except it most of the time it looks like, and you use it like an ordinary phone. When you folded it down, it's pretty much a standard kind of smartphone case, smartphone fold factor. So however whatever pocket you typically tote it in and so on, you're not kind of like folding it closed or something. So it's basically a more familiar kind of phone that you can turn into a device with a lot more screen on it. So yeah, that is kind of cool.
Yeah, neat stuff. And I think now LG announced that that's coming out this year, by the way. We'll see if it actually comes out this year, but they didn't say when this year. They just said 2021. But if it does come out, that is definitely my tech pick. That is cool stuff. And I hope we see more stuff like that as that technology evolves to make displays a lot more dynamic and adjustable to situation in a very slick way. So good stuff. Rich, we got a couple minutes left. Why don't you go ahead and pull out your crystal ball and get ready to tell us what has happened in the past that we might have missed thanks to Mr. James Gaskin, and what we might see in the future. That other than the stuff that like we just talked about, that's all coming in the future.
Yeah. Well, except that there's even more of that. So every Friday on ChannelProNetwork.com, our In Case You Missed It post fills you in on all sorts of news from the week that was you may have missed. We've been talking nothing but CES for this whole episode, but there is even more CES news out there. We'll be getting to some of that in case you missed it this week. We didn't even talk about the fact they've got a brand new CEO at Intel, but James will talk about that a little bit too. And as long, we were talking about a smart mask before. As long as we're talking about interesting products introduced in relation to CES, James is going to be talking a little bit about a collar from South Korea that automatically translates what your dog is trying to tell you. A smart dog collar. Turns out if the dog is barking angrily, he's trying to say I'm angry. But we'll get more of that from James. Looking ahead to next week. Next week is Nerdio's very first conference, virtual conference of course. NerdioCon is happening next week. I'm sure we will have something to talk about there. There's also the BETT, the BET conference taking place online. That is a showcase for education technology. I happen to know for a fact that a major hardware manufacturer is going to be introducing some Chromebooks in relation to that, and I'm sure we'll end up talking about that next week too. The second week, we didn't even get into it all, but at all on the show. But the second week of the National Retail Federation Conference, the biggest retail tech show of the year, that goes into week 2 this coming week. Our friends at IOTSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association, have their first virtual event of the year. So there's actually quite a bit coming up next week.
Awesome. Look forward to all of that. So make sure, folks, point your web browsers to www.channelpronetwork.com each and every morning. So that way, all day, every day, we've got all of the latest white papers, news articles, downloads, podcasts, resources, everything you need to make your business better, to stay abreast of the news and what's going on, and to help you make more money. That is our job here, Rich. That is what we do. Is it not?
That is the mission.
So do that. ChannelProNetwork.com is the website. Also, subscribe to the Channel Pro Weekly podcast. So that way, whenever we have new episodes that are coming out, they just poof, magically appear on your device, or basically everywhere podcasts are found: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, pretty much everywhere. We were on Audible, Rich. We're not in Audible again. I don't know why. I sent a little thing in. I don't know. I haven't gotten a response yet. But if you're looking for us on Audible, we should be back. But we're in Amazon Music still, which, like I said, doesn't make any sense. So subscribe to us on Amazon Music instead. Whatever. Just it's a different app. Who cares? What else? Oh, we're on all the social networks. Follow us on those. We're on. We're everywhere, Rich. Podcast at channelpronetwork.com is the email address. Make sure that you send us in your comments, emails. We want to know what you think, so that way we can make Channel Pro Weekly better for you. Rich, anything else before we say goodbye to our kind of CES extravaganza?
Well, I'm just going to ask you. I was thinking to myself as we went into this episode, there's probably never been an episode of Channel Pro Weekly that Matt has enjoyed more. Nothing but hardware beginning to end. Did it pay? Did it live up to expectations?
I had fun this episode, as you can tell. I really did enjoy it. Hardware is kind of my thing, so I always get excited when we can just talk nerd for a couple hours on end. And of course, I want to give a big thanks to Jeff Halash for coming on and joining us to talk about the CES stuff. He's always great to have on. Always have lots of fun. And of course, I do encourage people to check out their podcast, MSP Unplugged. Rich and I've been on a couple times there as guests. So good relationship, great people. So definitely check that out as well. And big thanks again to Stephanie Hallford at Intel for coming on and seeing us. Rich, what do we got coming up next week on Channel Pro Weekly?
Oh, you caught me by surprise. Let me look up here and see. So we have got an interview next week with a woman, the editor-in-chief of an online publication that focuses exclusively on the SMB market. It's for SMB business owners. It's not technology specific, but it should be an interesting conversation as we head obviously into 2021. It'll be interesting to speak with her about her view on just the SMB economy and landscape in general, and what we can kind of surmise from there. What potentially that means for our readers. And then who's our co-host next week? Our co-host next week is this will be great. Our co-host next week is Peter Melby.
I love Peter. He's so much fun.
He is excellent. He's outstanding, and we had him on ChannelPro's most recent conference with us. Actually, I think it was the one that we did in December. He's an MSP solution provider in the Denver area. He just recently sold his business to a private equity firm. He stayed with it. He's still running it, but he has private equity ownership. So he'll be with us the whole episode. We'll be talking about whatever is in the news, but I am actually looking forward to getting a bird's eye, or a on the ground frontline view of what it is like, the thinking that went into the decision to sell to private equity, and how that process kind of unfolded, and how things have been unfolding in the 2-3 months since he completed that deal. Should be very interesting.
Awesome. Well, look forward to that, folks. In episode 173, we will see you all next week. Take care.